They say humanity reached for the stars, but no one expected them to fall into darkness instead. The Galactic Council had hoped Earth would join their alliance, a coalition of the brightest civilizations working together for peace and progress. Yet, for reasons no one could understand, humanity remained silent. Invitations went unanswered. Messages were ignored. It was as if a shadow had fallen over the planet, pulling it away from the light of the stars and into a strange, unsettling darkness. This darkness was not just a metaphor. It was something felt deep in the hearts and minds of humans themselves. Scientists across the galaxy struggled to explain it. Despite all the technological progress humanity had made, a strange loyalty had taken root, not to the Galactic Council, not to the ideals of cooperation and advancement, but to a force older than time itself, a force they called death. The Council watchers observed from afar, perplexed. Earth was shrouded in an eerie silence, its signals faint and distorted. Strange phenomena were reported. Brief flickers of shadow sweeping across cities, unexplainable waves of cold that left people with a haunting chill. Some claimed they saw figures, shapes dark and indistinct, lurking just beyond the edges of perception. Humanity was not just turning away from the galaxy. They were seemingly embracing this dark presence. In the heart of this mystery was the figure known simply as Death, a silent, enigmatic force. It did not arrive with violence or destruction, but rather with an unyielding stillness. It whispered promises to humanity, relief from suffering, meaning in the inevitable end, power in surrender. This whisper was soft, almost inaudible, yet it reached the deepest parts of the human soul. Those who listened felt a strange comfort, a promise that there was purpose in the pain. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council grew anxious. Their emissaries were ready to intervene, but they feared what they might find. On Earth, humans had grown withdrawn and secretive, as if caught in a web they could not escape. The Council debated endlessly. Could they save humanity from this shadow? Or was this allegiance to death a choice too deeply rooted to undo? Among humans, there was confusion and fear. No one spoke openly about the dark force, but everyone felt its presence. Families whispered of it in hushed tones. Scientists sought answers, but found only more questions. The more they probed, the clearer it became that humanity's history, its wars, losses, and constant struggle against mortality, had woven this connection with death into their very being. Despite this, not all had given in. Somewhere in the world, a small but growing group sensed that death was not their enemy, but perhaps a part of their journey. This belief stirred hope, a fragile flicker in the vast shadow that had settled over humanity. As Earth spun silently under cold stars, the question remained: why had humanity, of all species, come to serve death instead of the Galactic Council? What secret lay in the heart of this shadow that held them captive? The galaxy watched and waited, holding its breath for the answer that might change everything. The Galactic Council had sent their most trusted envoy, a diplomat named Ceres, on a final mission to Earth. It was a mission filled with hope, but shadowed by uncertainty. The Council had extended countless offers of friendship, technology, and peace, but all had been met with silence or cold indifference. Now, Ceres was Earth's last chance, a bridge between the light of the galaxy and the mysterious darkness enveloping humanity. As Ceres descended through Earth's atmosphere, the planet looked both familiar and strange. Cities sprawled beneath, but they seemed quieter than expected, almost subdued. The energy of progress was still there, but beneath it, something else lingered, a quiet tension that Ceres could feel even from orbit. Upon landing, Ceres was met not with hostility, but with a distant kind of acceptance. Human leaders listened politely, but their eyes told another story, one of exhaustion, resignation, and something deeper. It was as if the weight of unseen chains pressed down on their spirits. Ceres soon realized that Earth was not ruled by politics or economics alone anymore. There was an unspoken force at play, a dark presence, felt but rarely named. Whispers of a figure called Death moved through the cities like a chilling breeze. Death was not a person, nor an enemy to fight. It was a shadow cast over the human soul, a quiet promise that the end was near, and in that end, there was meaning. In the halls of power, Ceres found humans hesitant to trust the Galactic Council. They were grateful for the offers, yet seemed trapped by their own fears. They spoke of history, a history heavy with pain, loss, and cycles of destruction. Death was not just an idea, but a companion they had learned to accept, a force that gave their suffering purpose. To many, turning to the council felt like turning away from the only certainty they had. Ceres met with scientists and philosophers who explained this paradox. Humanity's long history of survival against odds, natural disasters, wars, disease, had created a collective consciousness shaped by mortality. Death was woven into their identity, not as an enemy, but as a guardian of truth. To reject death was to reject what it meant to be human. Despite this, Ceres felt a quiet hope flicker in some eyes. Among the people were those who questioned this loyalty, who dreamed of reconnecting with the galaxy. But fear held them back, fear that without Death's shadow, humanity would lose its meaning entirely. Outside the meeting rooms, Ceres witnessed the everyday life of Earth. Streets hummed with activity, children laughed and played, and yet a subtle melancholy lingered. It was as if every smile hid a secret sorrow, every joyful moment shadowed by the knowledge of inevitable loss. One night, Ceres stood beneath the stars and looked up at the vast galaxy. From this distant vantage point, Earth seemed both fragile and defiant, a world caught between despair and hope. Ceres understood that saving humanity would require more than diplomacy or technology. It would require understanding the depths of their fear and the strength of their spirit. As the envoy prepared to report back to the Galactic Council, a question echoed in Ceres's mind. How do you save a species that does not want to be saved? The answer remained elusive, hidden deep within the silence that surrounded Earth. Yet Ceres knew this mission was only the beginning of a longer, more difficult journey. The council waited anxiously, aware that time was slipping away. Humanity's loyalty to death was not just a mystery. It was a challenge that threatened the balance of the entire galaxy. If Earth fell deeper into darkness, could the light of the Galactic Council still reach them? Or was humanity lost to a fate written in shadows? The stars held their breath, watching and waiting for the next move in a cosmic game where hope and despair danced dangerously close. Death does not shout. It does not demand. Instead, it whispers, a quiet, relentless voice that slips beneath the noise of everyday life and settles deep inside the human mind. This whisper is not a call to violence or rebellion. It is a promise of release, of peace beyond suffering, and a final end to the chaos that has defined humanity's existence for millennia. In the shadowed corners of cities, in the hearts of those burdened by loss and pain, Death's voice grows stronger. It is a seduction that offers something no technology or alien wisdom can provide: certainty. In a universe filled with uncertainty, where every life is fragile and fleeting, Death offers an answer to the eternal question, what comes after? Those who hear this whisper do not see death as an enemy. Instead, it becomes a presence that comforts them in the darkest hours. It teaches that surrender is not defeat, but a form of strength. This quiet seduction is the reason humanity has turned away from the bright ideals of the Galactic Council, whose promises of peace and progress feel distant and hollow in the face of such deep, personal pain. Scientists studying this phenomenon find themselves baffled. Death's influence is subtle, almost invisible. It leaves no physical mark, no sign that it has passed, yet its effects are undeniable. People change, not all at once, but gradually. They lose the will to reach for the stars, the hope to build a better future. Instead, they become more inward, more focused on the end rather than the journey. Philosophers argue about the nature of this bond. Is it weakness or is it wisdom? Is humanity simply succumbing to despair, or is it embracing a profound truth that many civilizations refuse to acknowledge? That death is an inseparable part of life, and to deny it is to deny one's own existence? Among the people, stories begin to circulate. Stories of those who have heard the whisper and found peace in acceptance. They speak not of fear, but of a strange liberation, of freedom from the endless struggle to survive. These stories spread quietly, like seeds carried on a gentle wind, planting the idea that perhaps loyalty to death is not a curse, but a choice born from understanding. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council watches with growing concern. They see a civilization slipping away, not through war or conquest, but through an inward turning, a collective resignation that challenges everything the Council stands for. Their emissaries report back with grave warnings. Humanity's loyalty to death threatens to unravel the fabric of galactic unity. But death does not rush. It waits patiently, knowing that true surrender cannot be forced. It understands that the power it holds over humanity is not through domination, but through a shared truth that even the brightest stars in the galaxy cannot erase: the certainty of an end. As the whispers grow louder, small pockets of resistance emerge. These are the ones who refuse to let go of hope, who believe that humanity can find balance, that they can honor death without becoming slaves to it. They argue that mortality, while inevitable, can inspire courage and innovation rather than despair. Among them is Mira, a scientist haunted by personal loss. She listens to death's whisper, but chooses to question it. For Mira, the challenge is clear: to find a way for humanity to live fully, aware of death, but not defined by it. Her quest is dangerous, walking the thin line between surrender and defiance, between shadow and light. Death's whisper remains ever present, a shadow at humanity's back. But the story is not yet finished. The question remains: can humanity break free from the silent seduction and reclaim its future? Or will the quiet promise of death become the final chapter in humanity's cosmic journey? The galaxy waits, holding its breath, as the delicate balance between hope and despair tilts ever so slightly. To understand why humanity clings to death, one must first look back at the scars left by centuries of suffering. Earth's history is a tapestry woven with loss, wars that ravaged continents, plagues that decimated populations, and disasters that reshaped the planet itself. These wounds are not just events in a textbook. They are etched deep into the collective memory of humanity. They have shaped the way people think, feel, and ultimately, how they relate to the idea of death. For millennia, humanity has battled forces beyond its control: nature's fury, the cruelty of other humans, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. Each generation was born into a world where survival was uncertain, where hope was fragile, and where the future was never guaranteed. Over time, this relentless struggle created a unique bond between humanity and death. Not one of hatred or fear, but of understanding and acceptance. This bond is complex. It is a recognition that death is not merely an end, but a part of life cycle. It teaches humility and patience, reminding humanity that all things are temporary. Many humans find solace in this truth, especially those who have lost everything. To embrace death is to embrace the natural order, to find peace in the knowledge that suffering will eventually cease. Scientists who study human behavior and history see this connection reflected in art, religion, and culture. From ancient burial rituals to modern-day meditations on mortality, humans have always sought ways to make sense of death. It is woven into stories, songs, and symbols, creating a framework through which people can confront their deepest fears. This cultural thread is a testament to humanity's resilience and their attempt to find meaning even in the darkest times. Yet, this acceptance of death also comes with a cost. For many, it breeds resignation, a quiet surrender to fate that dampens the desire to reach beyond the present pain. This is the paradox that puzzles the Galactic Council. How can a species so intelligent and capable allow itself to be held captive by such a somber force? Why choose a shadow over the radiant possibilities offered by the Council's alliance? The answer lies not in weakness, but in the profound psychological impact of trauma. When hope is fragile, the promise of death's release can seem like a balm to a wounded soul. It is a choice born from pain, not ignorance. Understanding this is the first step toward empathy, a necessary step if the galaxy is to help humanity find a new path. In quiet moments, some humans wrestle with this truth. They feel the pull of death's comfort, but also long for more light, more connection, more life. This inner conflict is at the heart of the human experience, a tension between acceptance and resistance. It is a battle fought not with weapons, but with ideas and emotions. Mira, the scientist who has become a symbol of hope for some, embodies this struggle. She is haunted by loss yet refuses to give in to despair. Her work seeks to uncover new ways to embrace life without denying death, to break the cycle of resignation and open doors to renewal. Myra's journey is not just scientific, but deeply personal, a quest to redefine what it means to be human in a universe that demands both courage and compassion. As the Galactic Council watches, they begin to see the depth of humanity's pain and the complexity of their loyalty to death. It is not a simple matter of allegiance or rebellion, but a reflection of a species grappling with its own mortality and history. This realization changes the nature of the Council's approach, from one of intervention to one of understanding. The story of humanity's bond with death is not one of defeat, but of survival. It is a testament to the strength required to carry pain across generations and still find reasons to hope. The future remains uncertain, but within that uncertainty lies the possibility of change. The galaxy waits, not with judgment, but with cautious optimism, as Earth's people continue their silent struggle between shadow and light. Whispers of Earth's growing darkness had reached every corner of the Galactic Council's vast chambers. What once was a distant concern had become a pressing fear. The Council, a gathering of civilizations that had long fostered peace and progress, now faced a challenge unlike any before. Humanity's loyalty to death was not simply a problem for one planet. It was a threat to the fragile balance of the entire galaxy. In the Council's Grand Hall, debates raged. Some members urged immediate intervention. They argued that humanity's descent into shadow could spread, infecting other worlds with despair and resignation. If the human bond with death went unchecked, it could unravel the very fabric of galactic unity. Others counseled caution. They warned that forcing help on a species so deeply entwined with its own suffering might do more harm than good. What if humanity's relationship with death was not a weakness, but a form of wisdom the Council had yet to understand? The galaxy had witnessed many species, each with their own way of facing mortality and meaning. Perhaps this was simply humanity's path. The tension in the chamber was palpable. On one side stood those who feared the loss of hope and order. On the other, those who believed in patience and empathy. The debate reflected a deeper question. Could the council truly grasp the depth of human pain? Or was their fear blinding them to a truth that only humans could live? Meanwhile, on Earth, this fear of intervention grew among humans themselves. Rumors spread of alien eyes watching too closely, of forces that might try to save them against their will. The shadow that clung to humanity was not only death, it was now distrust, suspicion, and isolation. Amid this growing divide, a faction within the council began advocating for a new approach. They proposed sending envoys not as rulers or saviors, but as listeners. Their mission would be to understand humanity's suffering, to walk quietly beside them rather than lead or command. This idea found support in unexpected places. Even some of the staunchest skeptics agreed that the galaxy could not impose its will on a species so profoundly affected by its own history. Respect, they said, must come before action. The Council's decision was made. A small delegation of empathic diplomats, philosophers, and healers would journey to Earth. Their goal was not to rescue but to connect, to share stories, to learn, and perhaps to plant seeds of hope without uprooting the fragile bonds humans held. Back on Earth, the arrival of these new envoys stirred mixed reactions. Some welcomed the chance to be heard, to explain their loyalty to death in their own words. Others recoiled, fearful that any attempt at understanding was a prelude to control. These envoys walked the streets, sat in quiet rooms with those who had lost everything, and listened. They heard stories of love and loss, of survival against impossible odds, and of a deep longing for peace, both in life and beyond it. They came to see death not as a villain, but as a companion to humanity's journey, one that needed to be honored, not feared. Slowly, the Council began to understand that humanity's bond with death was woven from threads of pain, endurance, and hope. It was not a surrender, but a complex dialogue with existence itself. The envoys returned with this truth, urging the Council to rethink its approach. Yet fear did not vanish overnight. Some factions remained wary, pushing for stronger measures to contain Earth's darkness. The galaxy was caught in a delicate balance, a dance between fear and hope, between intervention and respect. The question lingered. Could the Galactic Council and humanity find a way forward together? Could they bridge the gap between light and shadow, between the promise of stars and the certainty of death? As the galaxy watched, Earth continued its silent struggle. The future was uncertain, but the conversation had begun. And in that beginning lay the fragile possibility of healing. The stars held their breath, waiting to see if humanity would reclaim its place among them, not as subject of death, but as partners in a shared cosmic journey. The arrival of the Galactic Council's empathic envoys marked a subtle but profound shift on Earth. Unlike past emissaries who came bearing demands or offers, these new visitors brought something different: patience and genuine curiosity. They did not seek to change humanity overnight. Instead, they listened. The envoys traveled across continents, sitting with elders who remembered wars, with parents who mourned children lost too soon, and with young people who carried the weight of an uncertain future. Every story shared revealed layers of pain and resilience, of a species shaped by hardship yet still striving for meaning. Among the envoys was Leora, a philosopher from a distant star system known for her wisdom in dealing with grief and loss. She observed the deep bond between humanity and death not as a curse, but as a complicated dialogue, a dance between surrender and hope. She understood that for humans, death was not merely the end of life, but a symbol of all the pain endured and all the peace sought. One evening, Leora met Mira, the scientist who had been quietly leading efforts to find balance between life and death. Mira spoke of her work, attempts to harness humanity's fear of the unknown into a force for innovation rather than resignation. She believed that acknowledging death did not mean surrendering to it, but could inspire a deeper appreciation for life's fleeting beauty. Their conversations were long and filled with questions about mortality, meaning, and the future. Mira shared her fears that humanity's silence and withdrawal were signs of a species on the brink of giving up. Leora countered gently, saying that this silence was also a space, a pause where new possibilities could emerge. As weeks turned into months, the envoys noticed something remarkable. Small communities began to experiment with new ways of living that honored both the reality of death and the desire for connection and growth. Art, music, and philosophy flourished, reflecting a newfound openness to exploring the mysteries of existence. In one coastal town, a group of elders created a ritual blending ancient human customs with ideas from the council. It was a ceremony not of mourning, but of celebration, a recognition that life and death were intertwined threads in the same tapestry. These gatherings drew people from near and far, sparking conversations that reached beyond grief to hope. However, the shadow was not gone. There were still those who clung tightly to the whisper of death as a final refuge. For them, the galaxy's light seemed distant and cold. The envoys understood that change could not be rushed. It had to grow naturally, nurtured by respect for humanity's pain and resilience. Back in the Galactic Council, reports from Earth sparked renewed debate. Some members worried that the slow pace of change was a sign of failure. Others argued that this gentle, empathetic approach was the only way to honor the complexity of human experience. Leora spoke passionately in the council chambers, urging patience. She reminded them that every civilization faced its own trials, and that the path to healing was rarely quick or easy. To force change risked destroying what little hope remained. On Earth, Mira continued her research, driven by the stories she heard and the connections she made. She began developing technologies designed not to conquer death, but to help people live more fully in its presence. Tools that enhanced memory, deepened empathy, and celebrated life's fragile moments. Her work inspired a new generation, those who refused to accept that death must be a prison. They saw it instead as a partner in their journey, a reminder to cherish every heartbeat and every breath. As the envoys prepared to return to the council, a quiet optimism had taken root. The relationship between humanity and death was still complex, still shadowed, but it was also alive with possibility. For the first time in a long time, the future did not feel like a sentence, but a question waiting to be answered. The galaxy watched not with judgment but with hope, as Earth began to find its own way through the darkness. The story of humanity was far from over. It was unfolding, one whispered conversation, one shared tear, and one fragile spark of light at a time. The fragile hope sparked by the envoy's arrival began to ripple through Earth, reaching places long untouched by light. Communities once steeped in silence started to speak again, not of surrender, but of questions, dreams, and cautious optimism. Yet, beneath this slow awakening, a deeper battle simmered within humanity's collective soul. In the heart of a sprawling city, Mira stood overlooking the skyline, her thoughts heavy. Despite progress, she could feel the relentless pull of death's whisper tugging at the edges of minds and hearts. It was a force woven into humanity's very being, a constant reminder of loss, pain, and endings. Could this ancient bond ever be truly transformed, or was humanity forever destined to walk the fine line between hope and despair? The answer, Mira knew, lay not in denial but in acceptance. Acceptance of death as a companion, not an enemy. Yet this was easier said than done. Many still saw death as an escape, a final refuge from suffering. Others feared the galaxy's light as something alien, something that threatened their hard-won understanding of existence. Amid this turmoil, a new movement began to rise, a coalition of thinkers, artists, and scientists who called themselves the Keepers of the Threshold. They believed that humanity's relationship with death could be a source of strength, a doorway to a deeper understanding of life itself. Their goal was to bridge the gap between shadow and light, weaving death into the fabric of hope. The Keepers held gatherings in abandoned theaters and quiet parks, places where voices once silenced could rise again. They shared stories of grief and healing, of despair turned into creativity. Their art spoke of endings and beginnings, of cycles eternal and fragile. Slowly, their message spread beyond the cities to smaller towns and rural communities. Mira became a reluctant but vital part of this movement. Her scientific mind sought answers in data and technology, but her heart resonated with the Keeper's call to honor the human experience in all its complexity. Together, they explored new rituals that combined ancient human customs with insights from the Galactic Council. Rituals that embraced death as a teacher, a guide, and a catalyst for growth. Yet not everyone welcomed this shift. Resistance arose from those who saw any acceptance of death beyond fear as dangerous. They feared losing control, feared that embracing death would weaken humanity's will to survive. Tensions flared and old divisions resurfaced. One evening, as Mira walked through a gathering of keepers, she felt the weight of this conflict. Voices argued passionately, some urging caution, others calling for bold change. Mira understood that the path forward would not be easy. It required balance, empathy, and the courage to face the unknown without succumbing to despair. In the shadows of this struggle, the Galactic Council observed quietly. The envoys had returned, bearing stories of humanity's awakening, but also of its turmoil. The Council recognized that Earth's journey was unique, a complex dance between acceptance and resistance, between shadow and light. They knew that they could not dictate humanity's future. Instead, they offered their support as guides and partners, sharing wisdom but respecting Earth's autonomy. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, watching as humanity grappled with its fate. Mira found herself standing at a crossroads, not just for herself, but for all of humanity. She knew the stakes were immense. The choice was not between life and death, but between living fully with awareness and surrendering to fear. In the quiet moments before dawn, Mira reflected on the stories she had heard, the faces she had seen, and the fragile hope that flickered like a candle in the darkness. She believed that humanity could rise, stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, but only if it embraced the totality of its existence. Death would always be part of the story, but it did not have to be the end. It could be a beginning. And as the first light of morning touched the horizon, Mira felt the stirrings of a new dawn, not just for Earth, but for all who looked to the stars and dreamed of a future where shadow and light could coexist in harmony. The dawn that Mira sensed was more than just a change in light. It was the stirring of a new consciousness, a fragile but powerful awakening in humanity's heart. The struggle between death's quiet whisper and the shimmering promise of the Galactic Council had reached a tipping point. For centuries, humanity had danced with despair, drawn by the solace of endings. Now, they stood on the edge of something different, a chance to rewrite their story. Across Earth, this awakening was not marked by grand declarations or loud victories. It was subtle, like the first breath of spring after a long winter. People began to question what it meant to live fully, knowing that death was not an enemy, but a part of the journey. The Keepers of the Threshold grew in number, spreading their message of balance, resilience, and hope. Mira's work flourished in this new atmosphere. Her technology, once designed merely to combat the shadow of death, evolved into tools that enhanced the human experience. Devices that preserved memories with vivid clarity, virtual spaces where people could share their grief and healing, and innovations that deepened empathy across divides. These creations became bridges, connecting the living with the echoes of those who had passed. In the Galactic Council's chambers, the mood had shifted as well. The members recognized that Earth's transformation was not a threat, but a beacon, a testament to the complexity of life and the power of acceptance. The Council resolved to support humanity's path, not by imposing their will, but by standing as allies. Yet the journey was far from over. Challenges remained. The shadows of old fears and grief still lingered in many hearts. The temptation to retreat into the quiet embrace of death's whisper was strong. But now humanity had something new, a community united by shared struggle and hope. One night, as Mira stood beneath the stars, she felt the weight of this moment. The galaxy stretched endlessly above her, a vast ocean of light and possibility. She understood that humanity's loyalty to death was not a betrayal, but a reflection of their journey. A journey marked by pain, endurance, and ultimately, transformation. Mira thought of the Galactic Council's distant chambers, where beings of light and wisdom had once seemed unreachable. Now, they were partners in a grand experiment, the experiment of life itself. Together, they were weaving a new narrative, one where death and life were threads in the same tapestry, each giving meaning to the other. In this new chapter, humanity no longer feared death as an enemy. Instead, they embraced it as a guide, one that urged them to cherish every moment, to live with purpose and connection. This acceptance did not diminish the value of life. It illuminated it. The stars above seemed to pulse with approval, their ancient light bearing witness to humanity's quiet revolution. The whispers of death had not vanished. They still lingered in the shadows. But now they were balanced by the song of life, vibrant and unyielding. Mira smiled, knowing that the future was uncertain but bright. Humanity's story was far from finished. It was a story of shadow and light, of endings and beginnings, of sorrow and joy. It was a story uniquely theirs, a story that would ripple across the cosmos. As the first light of a new day bathed the world, humanity stepped forward, not as slaves to death, nor distant subjects of the Galactic Council, but as creators of their own destiny. They had chosen to live fully, with open hearts and minds, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And in that choice lay the true power of humanity, the power to transform darkness into light, to find meaning in the mystery, and to journey boldly into the stars, hand in hand with death, not as foes, but as companions. The galaxy watched and waited for the next chapter.